Hello, hello, hello. Good morning, good afternoon. I am running behind this morning. It's morning over here. Give me a second. I got to get my stream up here on my phone so I can see comments people are having. Oh, welcome to the first ever full done Symfony Casts recording studio. So I almost completely forgot about this. So if you've been watching these screencasts, this is a different background than we've been having. So welcome. This is actually my basement. This is something I've been working on over the past 2 months. It's been really fun. It's also almost killed me. There's just a million details. I'm not a audio visual kind of guy. So for me, changing the microphone setup is kind of a scary thing. And when I did it, we recorded it, and some people thought it sounded great. Some people thought that they could hear echo, so we had to add lots of other details. There's padding on the walls that you can't see. But I'm really happy with it. So in the future, I think I've mentioned this, Symfony Casts, screencasts will have not me very often, but occasionally I will show up in the video, and this is what it will look like. So I recorded the first video a couple days ago with this setup, and I thought I would try it for the live stream today. So I hope that you like it. I hope it sounds good. And bear with me for 1 second while I finish getting things ready here. We are 1 day earlier. It's been kind of a weird start to the week. We had a 4-day weekend here in the United States for President's Day, which was cool. We used that to go skiing. So this is a picture of Leanna and Beckett skiing. Kind of our first ever skiing trip as a family, sort of. So 20 minutes from our house, we have a hill, and I really mean hill. If you are used to skiing on a mountain, like the Alps, I can't even imagine how I could describe how small the hill is that we normally ski at. You're down in 30 seconds. That's it. You get to the top, 30 seconds. Then you take the slow chairlift up. But even though the chairlift is slow, it's 5 minutes to get up and then 30 seconds to get down. So this weekend we went to a slightly bigger hill, one of the biggest hills that that is near our house. And for us, it's really big. It's like 10 minutes chairlift up, and then you ski down for 4 minutes. That's like huge for us. I've never actually skied on a mountain, so I can't imagine what that is like. But this is our big ski trip this weekend, and it was really cool. But it means that right now I'm having my Monday morning. So we did this 1 day earlier because I have something going on tomorrow, and it's Monday morning for me. So I thought, let's just kind of get started on some maintenance stuff. So that's what we're going to do today. And also, trying to get my thoughts here in order. If anybody has any good news to share, please share that. That was kind of my good news over the weekend. Took my family skiing. Leanna's been skiing for only 2 years in her entire life, and she likes it more than the rest of us. She's totally addicted to it. She's totally slow down the hill, and she'll admit that. She actually, it's really funny. My 7-year-old son calls Leanna's skiing. She says that she skis like a dot matrix printer. He's never seen a dot matrix printer, but I described a dot matrix printer to him once upon a time. Maybe you're not old enough either. It's like the old printers. It'd be like neat. So yeah, that's what Leanna, my wife, does across the ski hill. She calls it value skiing, just skiing like sideways as much as possible all the way down the hill. So anyways, we had a really good time. So if you have any good news, go ahead and share that. And I don't know, I'm just going to get started here. I've had, to be honest with you, a lot of stuff going on lately in the open source world. There's never enough time. We've talked about Morphing. We've talked about LiveComponents. We've talked about getting LiveComponents stable. This live stream has been almost my version of just what's on my mind. What's that thing on my mind that I want to work on? And part of the problem has been that I get all these exciting ideas, but it's really hard for me to finish them. There's just a lot of stuff going on. I'm sure you feel the same way in your life. So today we're going to circle back to something and hopefully actually finish it. So really what we're going to see here is just a little bit of open source maintenance, and I'm going to get to a pull request in a moment, but I actually want to start with merging and reviewing a couple of things. And I'll just kind of walk you through the process here. So this is the Symfony UX repo. And no, we don't want that. Here we go. Yep. So we are we talked about morphing quite a bit on this live stream, and morphing is really tricky. And in the last version of Symfony UX, we changed the morphing library behind LiveComponents from something called Morphdom to idiomorph. And as a reminder, a morphing library is something that takes the existing HTML on your page and you give it new HTML, and then it changes your existing HTML to look like the new HTML. So it's kind of a fancier version of just replacing. Instead of just taking the new HTML and replacing the old HTML with it, it kind of modifies the existing HTML. And last week we sort of talked about some of the reasons why that is a good thing. Ooh, wrong window on stream. You guys seeing the right window? Wait, I can see it right here. Oh, wait, did it freeze? No, wait, no, it didn't freeze. Hold on a second. I see the problem. This is me messing with my scenes. Live streaming. Let's see here. 1 second. Yeah, otherwise, if you can't see my full screen, it's not going to be very much fun. And as interesting as my OBS window is, it's not really what I want to be showing. What happened here? One moment, technical difficulties. So when I was getting all of this recording studio set up, I was messing with OBS. Sources, macOS screen, that's good. And there's the camera only. There's the share screen. Yes, yes, yes. This is good. But why won't you change with me, screen? Hold on 1 second. I think I'm gonna pop back out and come back in. I mean, the first thing I try is like unplug it and plug it back in, right? So I'll be right back. All right, so we are back, but that doesn't mean that it's actually fixed. Here. So what happens if I pop off of that? Hey, there we go. Man, okay, I'll add that to my checklist of things to check. So I didn't make any changes there. It's just turn it off, turn it back on. And so for some reason, it worked that time. Okay, anyways, back to the morphing. And thank you for saying something so you weren't just looking at my boring OBS screen the entire time. So when we switch the morphing libraries, in theory, the morphing libraries work effectively the same, but morphing is just hard enough that little things broke. So we will have a new Symfony UX release today with a couple of low-level morphing fixes. And the other thing I'm working on right now is Symfony UX Autocomplete and Morphing. It's a kind of a difficult library to get to work with morphing. So we'll have some fixes with this. So some of the fixes I was doing last week were related to Autocomplete and Morphing. And actually, thanks to the test suite, we caught a little regression before it was released. So I'm not going to go into any more detail on this because it's not that interesting. And let's just merge this. Let's see, this is called 1513. You maybe have seen this before. This is the Symfony official kind of internal merging tool. We do have a couple of failing tests right now. These are some deprecations that have come from upstream, which we need to look at, but they're nothing that have actually... They're probably not bugs because they just kind of showed up randomly between CI runs. All right. Push those changes and perfect. All right, so that's merged. Delete the branch. And let's go on. So I've been out for 4 days, so we have a number of new pull requests here. By the way, there's so many cool things going on in this space right now that I can't really talk about. Well, it's not ready yet, but it's coming. I have mentioned icons. Icons is getting really close, and there's some really cool things. It's going to work better than I thought it could. So icons are one. This lazy load component is another one that Simon just put up 2 days ago that he's been working on for a while. And there's several other things that are down in the pipeline. All right, here's a good one. So this is another from Simon. Okay, cool. So probably seen me do this before, but we built these stimulus twig helpers, like stimulus_controller and stimulus_action. And little by little, I've been using these less. And so this is actually just a pull request for ux.symfony.com itself, just going back to for consistency, just using data-controller or data-action, which I really like. It was one of those things where when I first started using Stimulus, these data attributes looked a little bit weird to me, and turned out I just needed to learn them like anything else. I just needed to kind of practice and get used to them a little bit. Once I gave them a chance, pretty quickly I started liking them. It also helped that I have the PHP Storm Stimulus plugin, which helps give you autocomplete. So as soon as I got that plugin, it was pretty much game over. There we go. Very simple plugin, but it works really well. All right, so let's take a look here. So this is, let's see here. What is this file? Oh yeah, recipe file tree. Okay, cool. Yeah. This is a little model class that runs this little file tree down here. You can see when I hover over this, it's using the stimulus_controller method right now. So that looks fine. This is fine. This is a little thing we use. When we show the demos in the site, we kind of strip out some of the extra details so that the demo code looks still realistic, but a little bit cleaner. So that's just updated for looking probably for the data-controllers, I'm guessing, or maybe Simon just found a better way to do this. Just pre-release callback. Okay, so it's just in the data dash. All right. Cool. I'm not going to look at this too closely. This is what we need to rely on tests for anyway. Okay. You can see this is another reason that we had that stimulus controller shortcut is the core UX controllers have really long names. Most of the time, you don't care. For example, if you're using the chart.js component, then you don't ever render the element directly. Let's see here. Where's the code? There we go. You call it render chart. So you don't really care. That render chart actually takes care of rendering the data-controller thing for you. So, and a lot of the components are this way. They have their own shortcut helpers. There are a couple that don't have that. And yeah, that's actually kind of ugly, but I'm still going to stick with it for right now. Here's another one. Wow, is that really... I don't love that either. That looks a lot uglier. Type strings, JSON encode, then escaping it for an HTML attribute. I mean, that's totally correct. But you can kind of see, I'm going to merge this, but this is kind of a reminder of there are some cases where that stimulus controller is still useful, or maybe we need a better way to be able to output values help escape values or something. Because that is not exactly the friendliest situation there. Oh, Simon's here. All right, cool. And Simon, I'm going fast through this just because I'm trusting you in all these changes. Side note, this is what tests should cover anyways. We should have tests that are catching these little errors. We do not have as robust of a test suite on ux.symfony.com as we should, I admit. So if you want to write some tests, then please do that. All right, good. Just seeing if anything else catches my eye other than the very standard changes. Oh, okay, this is interesting. Yeah, another one where we had to set these strings to an array and then output them down there. Oh, that's a good idea, Simon. Fetch them from HTML. That's an interesting idea. So I think you're talking about these strings right here. If you're able to fetch these strings from in HTML, for example, a template element. So you could have, for example, you might be thinking about something different, Simon, but for the typed component, you might put the controller on a span like we have here, but then you might have a template element inside of the span where you have all of the strings listed. The only thing I think about is the line break, where you figure out where one message starts and another ends. But that's really interesting. Yeah, template, exactly. I talk about the template element in the last stack tutorial, but the template element is great because it's meant for that. It's hidden by default. And even more than being hidden, if you put a template element on your page and you put something into it, the something you put into it is totally inert. So it's as if it's not on the page. You could put a template element with anything inside of there, and the stuff inside of there, it doesn't exist on your page. You can grab it via JavaScript and then put it on your page, and then it will do something, but it is made for this case where you have something that is a template. I want to put this there for later, but don't activate it. It's not visible. It's not active. If you had JavaScript in there, it's not working. It's not actually on your page. All right, source cleaner test, awesome. All right, so let's approve this. 1517. Leanna's iPads, AirPods are in here. All right, cool. That's a minor. By the way, this feature bug minor security is just a little categorization. Helps with the change logs and also knowing which release we need. So bug, anything that's not a bug fix is going to be a feature. Minor, this is on the site, so it's not even affecting the code at all. So that's why this is minor. And this is how we say thank you. Boop. There we go. I knew this one was from Simon, but sometimes it helps me get... somebody contributes. I want to be able to use their actual name if I can. All right, let's keep going here. Simon, buddy, you were busy. This is great. All right, so let's see. I'm going to skip the lazy load component right now. I'm focusing on just maybe some fixes because, as I mentioned, I'm going to do a release after this, so I don't want to merge anything really big right now. Fix peer dependencies, constraint on chart.js package. Let's see here. I know the history behind this. Well, I guess the question here is, do the test pass? So the history behind this is that in chart.js 3.9, they changed the way that they export their values. So, you know, when you use a third-party JavaScript package, you import from them. And depending on how that JavaScript package is built, you might import foo, or you might import curly brace foo from. You know, it just depends on how they export things. So they were migrating towards a better way of exporting values. And in 3.9, they kind of accidentally broke things. And so for a while, we were restricting not 3.9, but I don't think that we need to anymore, which is why, Simon, you can tell me if I'm wrong here, which is why we get rid of that. But let's check the tests. All right, so this is LiveComponents. This is actually the test that I broke. Oh, no, this is something else. This is one of those, I skipped the wrong test. The LiveComponents one is one of those failures that kind of came out of nowhere. I haven't had a chance to actually look and see what it is. So for the JavaScript test, let's see here. What is failing? Yeah, okay, right here. This is the one we actually just merged. So this is not a failure anymore. This is already going to work. Oh, this is just, Simon says it's just not valid. All right, hold on, let me see that. Anyways, the point is I'm looking at the chart.js tests, and I don't see any failures inside of here. Although I'm not sure we'd test that exact constraint, but backwards. Before we had 3.4 less than 3.9 or 4.0. Yeah, I think it's safe now. I don't think it's going to be very weird for somebody to upgrade to 3.9. If we have problems, then we can roll back. But we were basically trying to work around a weird situation in chart.js, and we have since updated our code in a way that works well with chart.js. So let's go for this as well. You can never guess what tricky things you're going to run into when you're working on an open source project. I mean, the fact that chart.js, of all things, would cause us all kinds of headaches with how they export values. This is going to be I'm going to call this a feature. It's not strictly a bug fix. There we go. Cool. And let's see, I'm gonna check out one more, maybe two more. Clean code to suppress warnings. I see. Had enough of those TypeScript warnings. So there are certain spots in our code where when you build TypeScript, you get TypeScript warnings because maybe some value is not quite declared as quickly, or as it's not declared as explicitly as it should. So I'm actually going to leave this for now because this looks like something I should look at more closely. And it's a minor thing. Just getting rid of it. It's just tightening things up. That's a good chore. It looks like there is a translation here. Look at that. From Simon Solutions, approved by Simon. Go Team Simon. Cool. Yeah. Loading more results. Looks great. If I remember correctly, this was a feature we added later, the ability to control this message. So when we did that, we added this placeholder for all of the existing translations. Cool. Let's get that. We know what those failures are. Technically a feature, though pretty minor feature. See me trip over my typing. I wish I could type as well as my wife Leanna does. She is an absolute demon on the keyboard. You can probably see me. I'm more aware of it now that I am live streaming. I look down at my keyboard quite often. It's kind of embarrassing. I feel like I'm 100 years old. All right. Now I want to get on to the chore that I've been working on for way too long. Here it is right there. All right. This has been a bit of a back and forth here. So this is something that I wanted to get done before LiveComponents went stable because it's going to be a backwards compatibility break. It's a fairly minor thing. And you can see the idea here. When you are setting up a live action, I've talked about this before, you currently use a data action name so that you basically say, hey, when I click this button, I want to trigger a live action. And the live action is called add item. And I want to pass these arguments. I want to pass an ID argument to that live action. And I want to pass an item argument to that live action. The problem with this, without getting into too big of a detail, is that this little parsing, this little syntax right here, it's not very robust. So for example, if you needed this value here to have a comma in it, it's not going to work because we think that comma is you separating your values. And there's various edge cases like that. Not even edge cases, just known values where it's just not possible to pass those values as arguments. So it was always kind of a nice syntax that I guess I eventually knew would not be robust enough. So while we're fixing this, we're thinking, how can we fix this and also make sure it's just done in the best way? So there were two competing proposals that went back and forth. And one of them was to use, well, first of all, the first thing we changed was data action name to data-live-action-param. This uses stimulus action parameters. This is the easiest part of the pull request because this is just an easy win. This is just us using more standard features inside of, there we go, inside of stimulus. So stimulus has a built-in way to pass arguments to a stimulus action. So this is a little confusing here because what we're doing is we are calling a stimulus action, data action, called action, which will then make an AJAX request to our live action. So there's kind of action inception happening here. But the point is, we want to be able to pass arguments to the stimulus action, and this is a way that you can do that. You can say data-live-action-param, and this would pass an argument to the live action, to the stimulus action called param, and then here would be this kind of new syntax. So it looks very similar to the old syntax. And then to handle weird characters or weird characters or multiple arguments, the idea here was actually to use a query parameter syntax. So you can see I have ID equals 5 and item name equals, and then you have to see the %20s inside of there. And the reason for this was that creating a parser, an actual language parser that parses that like JavaScript, is just a lot of work and kind of a silly thing to work on. And we could actually use a pure JavaScript syntax. Like we could actually parse this as JavaScript. So like it would work exactly like JavaScript except that requires eval. So eval is not as big of a problem as in PHP, but and this is a controlled syntax. But the problem with eval is that it's going to mess with CSP, so content security policy. So there's certain sites that run their JavaScript in a tighter security policy, which is a good thing, where they can actually allow or disallow different things. And when people run their sites using CSP, a really common thing to do is to disallow eval. So we didn't want to go down this road of suddenly using eval in LiveComponents and making everyone who used CSP, making their life a nightmare. So we're like, no, we're not going down the eval route. So that's why the query parameter idea was one of the ideas. The other idea, which I think has finally won, if you want to do some light reading, you can go down this idea here, or go down this giant thread here, is let's see if we have a good example here. Yeah, Simon's got a good example, is actually to use individual attributes for the action parameters. This is actually the original idea, and then we went back and forth. So you still have data action, right? To say that you want to call that stimulus action called action. And then you have data-live-action-name. So you're passing a param to the stimulus action called name. And so create user would be the name of your live action that you're going to make the AJAX call to. Then for every individual argument that you have, you're going to pass that as an additional param. So in this case, data live first dash name dash param. So the way this translates into stimulus is, boop. I always forget action params exist. Marco, that's because even more than me, you have been using stimulus for so long that you got used to life without action parameters. And then once they got added, then, you and me both didn't even remember to use them. Let's see here. Let's pull up a scratch. All right, so what this is going to map to is an action parameter called first name. So the one kind of weird thing about this syntax is that you have that normalization. Your data attributes have to have this kebab case. They have to be all lowercase and have a kebab case. So if you want your argument to be first name, it's actually first dash name. Like doing first name is not going to work because your browser actually sees that capital N and interprets it as a lowercase n because it's case insensitive. So if you want to have it to be first name, like we have down here, it's actually first dash name. So that's kind of like one negative aspect of this approach. At the same time, it's just standard stimulus. So this is a thing that stimulus does, and if you understand stimulus, you understand this convention. So, we're not inventing something new, which is really important in LiveComponents. We're just adopting something that already existed. So in this case, we'll be passing a first name and a last name arguments, and then down here you can also add a city argument to pass to that as well. So I'm not going to go into the details about why we kind of ended on this. It's the most reliable solution. It's the least magical solution. Oh, and as Kevin said, I won't do it today, but what this is really begging for is a twig helper function. So I talked about getting away from the helper functions. Talked about getting away from the helper functions like data dash, like stimulus action. Because so often when you're calling a stimulus action, it's just outputting an attribute. It's simple enough. But in this case, there probably is room for something like a live action. You can say live action, I'm going to call add user, and it's going to have like, come on AI. There we go. Well, that's fine. Something like that. Because this is going to require actually 3 attributes just for this. The one to activate the data action, and then the data live action name, and then a single data live param for the third one. So I think that using a stimulus action in this case probably makes a lot of sense. Anyway, let's kind of see if we can get this done here. All right, so live standard action. Let me resurrect my old branch here. I haven't worked on this in a couple weeks. Live standard action. It only took me 2 windows to forget what that was called. There we go. And really, I had this all done the first way, so I'm hoping what we can do here is just do some reverting, or not even reverting, just maybe go back in time. All right, so this is, let's see here. So I think this is when I changed here to the new way of doing it. So if we roll back to this, I'm going to create a new branch for this. Oh, that's not how you do that. You can check out -B and live standard action. Param take 2. I'm going to roll back to that. You can see why I have that shortcuts, because I'm tripping over my keyboard. All right, and then let's just see what happens. I have that local branch down, so I'm actually just going to run this over. So let's do git push Weaver Ryan, and I'm going to take this local branch here, and I'm going to run over this branch name. So let me copy that exactly. Haha. That's a scary looking command, isn't it? I mean, the -- force always makes it scary at the end. So push my local branch here over on top of that branch. So that should take us backwards in time. Or I don't know, or break everything. That's a fairly rare thing for me to do. Cool, actually, it looks right. Yeah, so commits 4 now. And let's update this. This is actually a really good thing when you're making a pull request, keeping your original comment up here up to date with whatever the code looks like. It's really hard when you're reviewing something and you see like a really nice description on top of how the feature should work, and then you see 20 comments, and you can kind of tell from reading the comments that how the feature works has probably changed, but then you go up to the top and it's not updated. It's hard for whoever's reviewing your pull request to get a really quick idea of how it works and what it looks like without having that thing up to date on top. It also ends up being documentation later. Somebody's going to find this pull request 2 months from now, and having this up to date is going to be helpful. So let's see here. So data action name, data live action name. It's going to be debounce 300 save. So this would be the simple case right here. It's just a rename. Oh, that's not right. Data live. See, I already forgot. Data live name param should be it. I have to update more in there, but I'm going to refer to my documentation in here to make sure I have this consistently. Yep, there we go. So I have the changelog here, data live action param. Data live data live. Oh, I called it action. That's right. That could have been either thing. So the word action in my case is the special kind of reserved name for the name of the action. So data live action param. Cool. And then down here, we have data live action param. Good. Let's get rid of that. And then this would be data live ID param. So it's a bit more work to get this set up, but it's very explicit. That was kind of the winning thing. It's just very easy to, you can see exactly what the value of my ID param is going to be, except that should be curly item ID. Cool. And I think technically I should escape this for like HTML args. That's probably not going to be needed in most cases, especially with that being an ID. So I'm going to leave that. All right, for multiple arguments or arguments of the character like a space, the changes look like this. This is not going to be needed anymore. It's just going to be naturally. That's a nice thing. Special characters are fine. You just need to make sure that they're escaped for the HTML attribute. And I'm removing the prevent modifier. So this is going to be data live action, data action live action prevent, data live action param save. That looks right. Cool. Hopefully I got that right. Awesome. And the last part, getting rid of the prevent, is just because Stimulus does that already. You can just add a :prevent on the end of any data action, and that will prevent default. So this is just getting rid of live components isms, things that are weird inside of live components. All right, let's check the docs now. Whoops. That's not what we wanted. Okay. BC break, the data action name attribute behavior was removed in favor of using stimulus action params, data-live-action-param. This is a breaking change. Here's the update. So I'm reading this carefully because I want to make sure we get this right, because this is going to affect a decent number of people's applications. So I want it to be really clear how we're changing things. Data-live-action-param. Yep, you can see item name, item dash name. Good, good, good. There's the prevent. And what I might do is, let's see here, let me check the tests. I might need to recompile this all the way down here. Whoa. Okay, yeah, I have some conflicts. That should not be too surprising. Sorry, let me rearrange my windows here. I get things set in just the right way. All right. So what happens with old PRs, right? They start exploding. Fortunately, these don't look too bad. Documentation changes. Live component, change log. Okay, this is what we want down here. So obviously that did not make it into 2.14.0. It is going to make it into 2.15.0 is actually what's going to be released today, if I remember correctly. I always double check these change logs before I release. So I'm going to put this up for 2.16.0. Yeah, I agree, Simon. That twig helper is going to be really important for escaping. Otherwise, people are it's going to work 95% of the time, and then suddenly when they have a value that needs to be escaped in an HTML attribute, it's not going to work. So that's fine. It's always been a bit of a trick with live components to try to get this really great syntax. Like how great can we make this syntax balanced with how can we do as many standard stimulus things as possible and do as little as possible ourselves. So in this case, the standard stimulus solution is not the most attractive, really, because we need those three attributes. But this is where we can kind of hopefully have the best of both worlds by introducing that twig helper. And the twig helper is also going to handle all the escaping as well. Oh, that's easy enough. Cool. Get rebase dash continue. What's next? More change log. Probably the same thing. Let's see here. Ah, that's right. I should actually update this, put this in my pull request description. So there's data action. There's an identical thing with data event. It's not as common of a feature, but there's a way for you to trigger an event on click. And we did the same change here. We changed the syntax from data-event to basically to be more standard. Things like data-live-event-param. And actually, I need to double check that that is correct. Let's see here. Let me fix this, and I'm gonna go back and look at that to make sure that is fully accurate with the final version. Oh, let's see here. Why did I change that signature? I don't know. Let's try the more strict signature and see if that's happy about it. Oh, I think I did some rearranging in here. Ryan, why did you do rearranging and then not finish your pull request? All right, well, hold on a second. We can figure this out. So render was just moved because there's a render down here. I don't really care where it lives, so I'm just going to delete the one down here. And private get emit directives. That same change. I can't remember if I changed it from event to any or from any to event. Oh, actually, I can tell right here. This is the new syntax right down here. Looks like I changed it to any. Oh, I think I know because the event object doesn't have a params on there. So let me actually back up here. This is kind of just TypeScript stuff. So any. And down here, the version we want is not this version. Cool. All right, good, good, good. I'll need to double check my tests after all this. Oh, the $sign in the method name. Yeah, I kind of borrowed that from Livewire. It's an indication of, it's a way to advertise on the live controller that this is a public method that is intended for users to use. Totally borrowed from Livewire, where they have things like live.render that does the exact same type of thing. Really, in LiveComponents, the stimulus controller is not something that you should access anyway, so maybe we should just delete these because you can get access to the underlying component object, which has all the same methods, and that's really what you should be working with. But yeah, that's what the $sign is. You know, I'm a PHP guy, right? I gotta slip $signs in there somewhere to make myself feel good. All right, I think we are good here. All right. Add that. Maybe you should add your own type, which extends the event. Yeah, I probably should. What's weird about it, and maybe Marco knows better than I do, but you know, stimulus itself is no longer built in TypeScript. So this is not a custom event that I have. We are reacting to a custom event object dispatched by stimulus itself. So in theory, stimulus should give us the event TypeScript type. I'm not sure that they actually do or make that available. I could be wrong about that. But even if they don't, you're right. You know, it would probably be a good idea to just create our own stimulus event type so that instead of having any all over the place like this, we can have like event, you know, stimulus event or something like that. And that would be a more responsible way to do things than changing to any. Okay, cool. All right. We back to the change log? Man, I cannot make this happy. Okay, let's see. I was fixing something or maybe adding something. Oh yeah, compiling ESLint. Okay, this is just an ESLint change. Guessing there's a subtle difference between these two. Yep. That's fine. Cool. And then this is actually a dist, so I'm going to do a yarn build for that. This will take a second because it will build all the components. So this is yarn build. It's taking the TypeScript and taking it to JavaScript for all of the UX components. One of which is LiveComponents. There it is. Cool. And I'm going to bail on that. Perfect. Get status and get... Wait, I thought I just added that one. Okay, that's just moving that. Cool. Perfect. All right, got there. Awesome. Let me do my complex pushing again. And there we go. All right, so that's done. I'm going to review this again later when I'm not live streaming and I have 100% part of my brain to make sure I didn't mess up one of the one of the rebases. All right. Cool. There's lots of other stuff on here, but we have about 15 minutes left. Ooh, actually, let's do this one real quick. Thank you for fixing this, Simon. Just in dark mode, the Tom select didn't look great. So this is just all entirely on the site. So this is great. All right, awesome. $15.10. The last thing I want to do today on the maintenance side of things is take you down the start of, well, a work in progress I have, pull request, related to autocomplete and morphing. Whoops. This is me tripping over my keyboard. Perfect. There we go. I'll say things manually this time. All right, here we go. So morphing, let's get this pulled up locally. I really, really want to get morphing working nicely with all of the UX components. Not just with the morphing from LiveComponents, but the morphing also from Turbo, so morphing in general. And autocomplete, this autocomplete library has almost killed me. I'm the one that introduced the autocomplete components. It's really cool what it does, but boy, the way it works under the hood is a total pain in the butt. I think I spent an hour on Slack last week talking with Simon about the challenges of getting autocomplete working with morphing. So I have a little demo page I'm going to pull up. Symfony open local. I think it is this one right here. Yep. Perfect. So what I've done here is, actually, let me go back and do a yarn build. Hold on a second. This is something that I would like to fix. It kind of drives me crazy. So when I am messing with things, this is one of the downsides of having TypeScript. When I'm playing with things locally, it's kind of annoying because you have to build TypeScript to see the changes. So what I sometimes do, maybe somebody else does this too, who works on this a lot, is I will short circuit the build process here, have it build only one component at a time. What we really need to do is just make that an argument to that little executable. Just haven't got around to doing that yet. So now it's only building autocomplete. And over here on ux.symfony.com, we have a little link script. I've used it before, and it makes sure that all the vendor libraries from ux.symfony.com are symlinked to the UX repository. So it means that what the changes I make locally, we're actually going to see those up on the site. And really only special thing I've done here is on this version of ux.symfony.com, I have Turbo 8 enabled, and I also have morphing enabled on this page. So when I submit this form, it's morphing behind the scenes. There we go. And you can see things seem to work just fine. Now the challenge behind all of this, actually, let me back up here. This field right here, this is an autocomplete field. So this is the problematic field that I want to get working perfectly. So let me open up the controller for that. And you can see it's already working pretty well, and that's because of some of the work that I've already done inside this pull request. This is the controller that integrates Tom Select. So I've mentioned it before. The library we use behind the scenes is called Tom Select. So it all started so innocently and nicely. I thought we'll make a tiny stimulus controller, and that tiny stimulus controller will activate Tom Select. It's great. Tom Select is the one that's doing all the hard work of being this autocomplete style thing. And over time, as you can see, what happened is this tiny stimulus controller has grown to 500 lines of code because there's just a lot of different edge cases that we need to cover with Tom Select. So let me show you the kind of latest attempt here with handling morphing. So there's two problems with morphing. One of them, I believe I have now handled. So problem number one, and this is the classic problem with morphing, is that, let me refresh the page here and inspect element on this. Perfect. So right here, we're focused on this div. Make this a little bit bigger. So you see this select right here? That's actually what was rendered on the page. That select and this label, these were just rendered on the page like normal. And the select has a bunch of data attributes for the autocomplete. But if you looked at the HTML of the page, like that's all there. So there's nothing fancy going on here. The label and the select are just real elements on the page. When TomSelect initializes, it makes 3 changes to this area. The first change it makes is it adds this div down here. This div is, whoops, the entire fancy select. So when you're interacting with this area here, you're not interacting with the select. You're actually interacting with this div right here. The second change it made is it added a couple of classes to our select element, TomSelected and TS Hidden Accessible. And this is actually what hides the select element so that we're not actually seeing the select element on the page because the select element is a fake element. And the third change it made was it actually updated the for attribute on the label. It added this little TS control there. This is, I believe, an accessibility thing. Let's see here. Oh, and also it changed the ID here. I believe basically pointing the label not at the hidden select, but actually at an element inside of the div down here. So the problem with morphing is that when we morph the page, if we do nothing else, when we hit submit and the morphing library tries to change this HTML to look like the new HTML, well, the new HTML is going to have the old for value. It's going to have the old ID value. It's not going to have these 2 classes right here. And this div is not going to be in the new HTML at all. So the new HTML is not going to contain any of these changes because the new HTML is coming from an AJAX call on the server. And so all 3 of those things are going to get removed. So challenge number 1 is to make the autocomplete controller aware of this to prevent those changes. And so the way we've done that, and this is all still kind of work in progress, is we've hooked into the turbo morph events. So there's the 2 we've done is before morph element and before morph attribute. And then these go down here to these things here. So before morph element, the first thing we're looking for is, hey, is the current element that's being morphed, so event.target is going to be, so let me back up here. This event is going to be fired on every single element that is being morphed, every single element on the page that's being changed by the morphing library. Maybe input type equals text plus data list is a saner option than TomSelect. It might be. I've gone back and forth on finding a different library or doing less fancy stuff. It's just hard to replace all the features of TomSelect. So that's why I keep going back and forth on, do we replace TomSelect with something else because this is insane, or do we keep pushing this forward and try to have a solution? And right now that's where I'm at, is pushing this forward and seeing if we can get a solution. So the first thing we look is event.target. That's the element that's being mutated right now, that's being morphed right now. And we say if it contains the class called tsWrapper, then event.preventDefault. So it says don't morph that. So this is what's going to prevent the extra class down, the extra div down here from being removed whenever there's morphing happening. The second thing we do is even more complex, is we check to see, is the current target this.element. So this.element is the select element. This is the element that the controller is actually attached to. If it is, then I'm not going to go into the details here, but we basically look at the option elements inside the select, and we compare what the options look like right now with what they look like in the new HTML. And if they are the same, so we had maybe 6 options before and we have the same 6 options now, if they're the same, we prevent default and we don't let the select element morph at all. This is a weird little spot that's necessary because of something TomSelect does that almost killed me, and maybe will almost still kill me in the future. And that is that when you can actually probably see it. It's not worth it. As you select elements inside of TomSelect, it actually rearranges your options. So let's imagine you have 3 options, just like A, B, and C, okay? Inside your select, so 3 option elements. If you select option B, it'll actually, if I remember correctly, move that to the top. So now it doesn't really matter for the user because the select is hidden, but it'll actually now be in the order of B, A, C. So the problem is that if you morph that, the morphing library will change the order back to A, B, C. That totally makes TomSelect lose its mind. This is where you get a bug where you will actually select B and hit submit, and it'll submit the value for A. Like rearranging the order on, like TomSelect rearranges the order, and it relies on that rearranged order to do its work. So what we're saying here is if the options did not change, meaning maybe they're rearranged, but the options themselves have not actually changed, then do not morph those options. Do not let those options change because that's going to break TomSelect. If they do change, we do allow them to be morphed. And what we have later is some code that will detect that and reinitialize TomSelect. So this is an edge case, but this would be a situation where the actual options for your TomSelect have changed. So maybe you have a dependent form field. If you select yes from one dropdown, the next field updates to have a bunch of new options. So in that case, we do let the options morph, and then we have code later that will reinitialize TomSelect entirely so that TomSelect is aware of the new options. And then down here, before morph attribute, this is the spot where we are just looking to see if looking for the label for an ID and making sure that those don't morph. So this kind of solves problem number one of preventing morphing from undoing the custom things that TomSelect does. And this is just really, really complex situation that I think we're hopefully close to solving. Problem number two is knowing when something has changed that requires us to reinitialize TomSelect. So one of the issues is exactly the one that I just talked about. If you re-render your form, and suddenly, let me back up. Let's say your select element starts with 3 elements in it, and then when your form re-renders, suddenly those options change to 6 options, like totally 6 different options. And again, maybe it's because you have a dependent form field where you changed one field, and that actually changes the options for your next field. If you're not using TomSelect, this works great. You maybe change one dropdown from yes to no, and then the entire form re-renders, and your select element goes from 3 options to 5 options, and the user now sees 5 options. TomSelect, however, it initializes itself on those initial 3 options, and when those options change from 3 to 5, it doesn't notice it. It has no idea that happened. So your TomSelect element would still use the original 3 options. So there are various scenarios where we need to tell TomSelect, hey, you need to totally reinitialize yourself. And those situations are if your option elements change, if your disabled attribute changes. It's kind of a subtle one, but TomSelect uses the disabled attribute on your select to know whether it should initialize itself into a disabled or not disabled state. And then the third one, which we haven't supported until now, but it's really important, is if the selected elements changed. So the use case for this is, imagine you have 3 options in your select, right? And the user selects one of them, they submit the form, and then you reset the form. So maybe you're building a to-do list, right? They select something from the dropdown, they hit add to-do, and you add the to-do to the database, and then you reset the form and render the form blank. So when you initially rendered it, you rendered the select with 3 options, and the user selected one of them. When the form re-rendered later, it's the same 3 options. The only difference now is that there are none selected. There are no values, no options selected on that select. That's another spot where TomSelect is not going to notice that, and our code needs to be smart enough to see that change and then reinitialize the code. Whew. I'm going to get my PhD on this topic, I think. So to handle that second style of things, we actually use a mutation observer. And this is partially working, maybe entirely working. I kind of stopped right in the middle of refactoring this last week. But anytime there's a mutation to our select element, so this is just a native DOM feature where you can ask the browser to notify you anytime there's any change to the select element. So whenever there's any change to the select element, we just run a series of tests. So the first one here is actually the disabled thing. It basically says, hey, let's compare the new disabled attribute to what TomSelect thinks it should, whether it's disabled or not. And if they aren't matching each other, then we need to tell TomSelect to change its disabled state to either enabled or disabled. Another one down here, which I didn't even talk about, was detecting that a select has changed from multiple to single or the other way around. Again, super edge case, but if for some reason your form suddenly, your select element suddenly goes from a normal select to a multiple select when it re-renders, TomSelect isn't going to notice that. You need the element to refresh itself. So we kind of check for that as well. This is where we check to see if the options have changed. And down here, which I have not actually tested this is where we check to see if the values changed. And if any of those have happened, then we reset TomSelect. So this is something I'm going to be working on this week and hopefully finishing. It's absolutely insane. It's just TomSelect being really complicated. Why do we have to worry about all this now and it was never a problem before? Well, the answer is that we talked about it last week. When you morph your controller element, this select element, this never disappears from the page. So when you're not morphing, this select element is entirely replaced with a new select element. So that means that the select actually is removed from the page and a new select is added. And that causes the connect method of the new select to be called. And so naturally what happens is the entire TomSelect instance is destroyed. And then the entire a new TomSelect instance is recreated. So it happens really quickly, but TomSelect is actually being destroyed and recreated and destroyed and recreated every time you submit your form in normal non-morphing Turboland. So as soon as you morph though, that doesn't happen. And so we're trying to basically maintain the same TomSelect instance without, and keep it working, but we're not throwing away the TomSelect instance and creating a new one. We're trying to keep it working. So that does lead me to one idea that I had over the weekend, and which is to basically trash all of this. And I have to think about whether this is going to work or when it's not going to work, and basically say, what if we didn't do any of this morphing and fancy stuff? What if whenever the element morphed, we actually detected that the select was being morphed, and we kind of did the same thing? What if we just completely reset TomSelect every time there was a morph? Like, don't look for this change or that change or this change. Just whenever this morphs, just say, okay, I'm going to completely remove TomSelect and I'm going to completely reinitialize TomSelect. And because maybe I've just been overthinking this thing. It's one of those things where I've thought about this morphing problem so much that I may be missing the forest from the trees, as we say in English. So my only concern, or my initial concern with that approach, is if the TomSelect is the active element. So you see here, as I type into this, let's see, I'll type into this, right? If I hit enter, it's hard to see because I don't have Simon's pull request merged yet that fixed dark mode. But right there, my cursor is still blinking. So the point is, even though I hit enter here, and that actually caused the, I believe that caused the form to re-render, if I remember correctly. Well, if it didn't on my case, there are other cases where you can't have the form re-render as soon as this value is put in there. The point is, I type in there, the form re-renders, and my cursor is still there. If we destroy the TomSelect instance and recreate it, my cursor is not going to be there anymore. But maybe there's ways around that. Maybe we can put the cursor back. Maybe if the TomSelect element is being morphed and it's the active element, then we don't morph it. This is actually something that Turbo does, and actually LiveComponents does now by default. They, remember exactly, it's a very small setting. It was a pull request merged last week. Where is it? There we go. So one of the pull requests that's going to be, one of the bug fixes that's going to be merged this week. There we go. So idiomorph is the morphing library. and it's called ignore active value true. So this is a setting we pass to idiomorph, and it basically says whenever it's morphing, when it gets to the input on the page that is active, meaning it has the blinking cursor, don't set that input's value. Just ignore it because the user is typing into that field right now. So don't morph that value. And this is important because without this, you can actually, even with normal inputs, you can kind of lose cursor position. I'm not going to get into it too much, but basically you're like, this is an active element. The user is typing into it right now, so let's not mess with it because it can mess up their experience. So it might be that we do kind of a similar thing for Tom Select and say, hey, if we detect that morphing's happening, we're going to just completely reinitialize Tom Select every single time, just to make sure. And that'll be a simple solution. Unless Tom Select is the active element, in which case we're going to do nothing. And maybe that's kind of a middle ground that's going to work really well. I don't know. All right, that's it. I'm going to stop talking now. Thanks for listening to my brain dump once again on morphing. I'm really excited to fix these behaviors. I don't even know if I would call them bugs. These things work. Autocomplete works with LiveComponents already, but that's because we have special code in LiveComponents. But Autocomplete doesn't work with Turbo 8 morphing yet. And so that's something I'm really excited to get all these working because I just want this stuff to work really well and be really dependable. This is really fancy, complex problems, but at the end of the day, we need our front end just to work in a very, very predictable way. The Autocomplete component is a great component, and I need it to work really well. So fingers crossed that we can kind of get that stuff worked out. Tarmo, select component is one of the most hardest things. Yeah, they have so many features that people want to use. Yeah, exactly. And when I've looked into other libraries or doing something less fancy with Tom Select, it's so feature rich that it's really difficult. There's actually someone in the Ruby on Rails community right now that's implementing a new, they call it a combo box. It's basically the same thing, which I've been watching. So they've been kind of creating one from scratch that kind of works better with this idea of HTML over the wire and stimulus and turbo and all that. So I'm keeping an eye on that. The code isn't released right now in a way that we could use it immediately. But it's also still an alpha release. There's a couple quirks with it when I was playing with it, but that's something that I'm looking at. Because ultimately, morphing gets easier and easier the more you really stick to the philosophy of HTML over the wire. If 100% of your HTML is being returned from your templates, so your server's always returning the correct HTML, then morphing is not a problem at all. Morphing becomes a problem when you have HTML changes that are made on the client side. And that doesn't mean you can't do those. There are good reasons to do HTML changes on the client side. Like a really good example would be some sort of button you press and it hides and shows something. There are actually different native ways to do that without writing JavaScript, but it's still a pretty good example. I click this button and I'm just adding or removing a hidden class from some other element that's hiding or showing that element. So there are good use cases for that, but the less we can do that and the more we can just return HTML from the server, the better our lives are going to be. So it's really about embracing that philosophy and life's going to be good. So Tom Select is exactly not that. I mean, 100% of the HTML from Tom Select is generated inside of JavaScript. And that's really almost not even the worst part. It's just that, honestly, if you look at Tom Select, it's old. The internals of it are a mess. And it does weird stuff all over the place. It's impossible to read the source code. And that's really probably what's caused most of the suffering. For example, that rearranging of the option elements that it does, totally unnecessary and totally causes problems on our side that just aren't necessary. All right, everybody, have a very productive week. I'm going to go fill up my coffee. So cheers. Thanks for hanging out. Again, I might change these live streams to Tuesday going forward. We will see. And yeah, go make cool stuff. We'll see everybody next time. Bye-bye.